மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. Thank you.
Carry on now our examination of the Miles variation, and we'll deal with another very plausible sixth move alternative for white here, and that's bishop e2. Again, continuing in the same modest style, but absolutely logical. The bishop comes out to e2, just preparing to castle and continuing with safe development. White doesn't expose the bishop. As the bishop came to c4, we saw that enabled black to get some counterplay with the move knight b6. Here white allows no such concession, and again says to black, well, you demonstrate equality to me. I'm going to use the game David versus Bauer. This comes from a French tournament in 2004 to show what I believe to be a good way for black. After bishop e2, black can play with knight d7, he can play with g6. But I believe bishop f5 is a pretty decent move here, and also quite provocative. Well, in the game David versus Bauer, white castled. Just going back, there was a famous game, Kasparov versus Nigel Short, from the Russia versus the rest of the world match in Moscow 2002. I think this might have been a rapid game, where Kasparov lashed out with the move g4, and this didn't turn out too well for him. This is an interesting fragment, so we should definitely examine it now. Well, Short went back to e6 with the bishop. White played c4, black played knight b6, and now b3. So clearly Kasparov is hoping to restrict Short with the help of these pawn moves, but I believe that he missed the next move, and that's f6. And the problem with this is that black is simply winning a pawn in this position, and so white has pushed one pawn too far, I think you could say. Well, obviously, if white goes knight f3 in this position, bishop takes g4. This is catastrophic. Kasparov tried knight d3. I mean, I suppose you could argue that he was intending this all along. You know, for the pawn, white is gaining time and development as well. Queen comes back to d8, knight comes out to c3, knight comes to a6. Queen d2, queen c7, and both sides castle on the queen side. And you could argue that the white's better centralised forces give him compensation for the pawn, but I'm not so sure. I mean, I think as long as black is able to solve the congestion on the king side, then he's going to be in reasonable shape. I mean, I'll just show you a few more moves. Kasparov went bishop e3. Short put his bishop back on f7, and white continued the policy of restriction by playing f4. Short put his king on b8, white went h4, black went e6, knight comes to e4, and now I think Short probably missed the best move. I mean, I doubt that Kasparov has any compensation at all if black have found the excellent move knight d5 here. Slightly surprising, but very effective. The upshot of all these pawn advances is that, you know, white is nursing weaknesses, and knight d5, I think, takes full advantage of that. Let's just see what might happen. For instance, if white takes on d5, black takes back on d5, check, and now we see the point of king b8, because you know, what black gets his queen off the same king off the same file as the queen. And after king b1, d takes e4, queen takes e4, bishop g6, another provocative move, enticing the white pawns forward. Well, then black takes, weakening the pawns, and then bishop f7. And I think that white lacks compensation, frankly, in this position. Going back to knight d5 one more time, this probably means that white can't take in this position. Instead, he should maybe prefer queen to f3. Well, after that, how about knight db4? And the idea is that black is relieving his cramp, typical idea in the Alekhine, by exchanging off the pieces. And well, it obviously makes sense to bring that knight on b6 back into the game very effectively, and here we see him exchanging off the knight. Again, I feel that black will be getting on top So that was a fragment from Kasparov's short, and if Short found 18 knight d5, I think he might even have won this game. As it was, in the end, the game ended in a draw. So going back to 6, bishop f5 now, we return to what I believe will be a much more common move amongst your opponents, the modest and careful move castles. And well, after that, black played knight to d7. So it's the same type of idea, except this way round, black has developed his bishop on c8 first. So that I guess if white takes on d7 with the knight, black is going to recapture with the queen. Well, again, many moves are possible. Bishop g4 was played. You know, white can think about c4, but black's plan is roughly the same as before. He's going to go e6, he's going to develop his bishop to e7. Very Scandinavian or Caro-Kann-like, and very solid and respectable for black. So bishop g4 is an attempt to take advantage of this particular move order. Black took on g4. Queen takes g4, e6. But again, this starts to look very comfortable, black. I mean, once those minor pieces are exchanged, I really think that black's position is absolutely fine. And so it proved. c4. White has to come to this sooner or later. And now the knight came to b4. No need for black robotically to go backwards in this position. It's quite awkward for white to deal with the threats in this position. Black is threatening both to take on e5 and penetrate to d3, and he's also threatening knight to c2. So knight takes d7 was played. Queen takes d7, and now queen to e4. And white was obviously hoping to solve his problems without tears here by centralising the queen. Rook to d8. Is that pawn on d4 strong or weak? David decided to push the knight back, and the knight went back to a6 and then bring his bishop out. Bishop e7. Knight comes to d2, and black castles. Very, very solid position for black. Very difficult for white to engineer any sort of break in this position. I mean, the break he is aiming for is d5 in this position. He may be entertaining ideas of b4, b5, but that's a long way off. So black is very comfortable. Okay, white brings his knight round to f3. And now a slightly surprising move, perhaps. Pawn up to f6. Very ambitious move, not a move everyone would have chosen in this position. But it's around here that Bauer's starting to think about playing for the win. The motivation behind f6 is clear. He wants to cut the white knight out of e5 and g5. But a possible weakness appears on e6. Clearly, black is hoping to defend this weakness comfortably with either rook f8 and bishop f8 or knight c7. Let's see. He's giving white chances to go wrong. White seizes on the weakness with rook fe1. Black defends coherently with rook e8. And now bishop comes back to d2, knight comes to c7. And a further weakening move. White's hoping to provoke black into playing b6, well, I think that's the only move he's got. And by so doing, maybe weaken that pawn at c6. Even so, it's hard to see how white's going to even think about attacking that pawn. All right, bishop f8. You know, it's pretty obvious that Bauer had seen this position in his mind's eye before he went f6 and thought, well, this should be okay. I mean, the e6 pawn is weak, but I've got solid defence. I'm defending it with 3 pieces. Who knows? Maybe I can look for counterplay with c5 in such a position. Counter-punching move. And then if white's pawn on d4 disappears, who knows? Maybe I can get my e-pawn going. So all these sorts of things are running through black's mind. White's got to find a plan. Rook a c1, and it's pretty clear from his moves over the next couple of turns that he hasn't really got a plan, because he can't see where to go from this position. Rook a c1, not sure what that's all about. Rook c8, and now white played h4. It's almost as if white can't decide quite what to do in this position. And now another very provocative move, h5. Point of that, I think, is that if white goes queen g6 in this position, black's going to come across with queen f7, and if white takes, Well, the more pieces that come off the board, the worse that bishop on c3 becomes. And the more pawns that black can fix on dark squares, well, once again, bad endings loom whilst that dark square bishop is on the board. So h5 is another very provocative move, but I think black has assessed this situation pretty well. So rook to e2. Bishop comes to d6. And now rook to c2. Well, I can't see what to do, it seems to me, so he just makes moves which don't weaken his position any further. Bishop f8. Is white going to take the draw? Or maybe black's just toying with white in this position. Rook e d2. And now b5. Another very common type of strike in such positions. Black is hoping to secure control over the central square d4. d5, excuse me. So what is white going to do? He brought his bishop back to a5, presumably intending just to chop that knight off. Black wasn't interested and played his knight to a6. He's got designs on the d5 square in this position. Rook comes to e2. And now black played pawn to c5. It's very interesting to see how those pawns on e6 and h5 are extremely difficult to attack. White's knight on f3 is restricted, and that is what enables black to create such vigorous counterplay with moves like b5 and c5. D takes c5. Knight takes c5. Hey presto, the knight has come back into the game. Queen comes into g6. B takes c4. It's interesting, black doesn't need to protect his pawns with queen f7. Instead, he prefers active play in the centre. Well, queen takes on h5, and black brought his knight into d3. So now all will hinge on whether that pawn on c4 is going to be strong or weak. White decided that it was going to be attacked immediately and played rook e4. But I wonder whether he saw rook c5 in this position. This smacks of time trouble to me. It's a complicated position. Black's knight has just come into a very intimidating square. You know, maybe white simply has to move that bishop away. Bishop c3 or some such move. But actually bishop d2, because I've just noticed black's threatening knight f4. So maybe bishop d2 in this position. And play on. But certainly rook e4 was a catastrophe. And rook c5 just threw white into total panic, I think. Because queen g6 was played. Rook takes a5. Rook e takes c4. Knight e5. Exchanges are permitted here. All exchanges must favour black. Rook comes into c7. And now another really remarkable and excellent move, which I'm sure white missed. Bishop d6. And, well, really, that's it. White played g3. That confirms my suspicion he was in time trouble. Let's just check out this one cute line. Rook takes e7. Rook e1 mate. So yes, the latter part of that game was coloured by time trouble, but this shouldn't disguise the fact that if we drop back to the critical position, let's say after 22h5, with counter-punching chances such as c5 in the wings, black shouldn't be in too much bother. So in short, 6 bishop e2 I feel should be answered by bishop f5, and after that I think black can look forward to a fairly comfortable game.
மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. Thank you.